Let's now have the floor speeches. If you don't mind waiting, if you put your hand up and I'll call you, and if you don't mind waiting until the microphone reaches you so that everyone can hear you. And we've already got, first off, yes, gentleman there in shirt sleeves.
My name is Chris Morgan and I'm part of Catholic Voices as well. I've got two questions really for Tim. I agree with a lot of what you said about the European Union not following the Catholic social teachings at the start. Just like to point out that in two areas you said. One is the European Court of Human Rights is not part of the European Union, which is created by the Council of Europe. It's got 47 member states in by the UK, so that's got to be relevant. And the second point is about the Constitution. Yes, it is in reference to Christianity, but it never passed, so we don't have a Constitution in Europe. But my question is this really. If we do leave, why do you think we'll have a more Christian country with people who leave according to Catholic social teaching? Won't we just have more of the unfettered free market? And secondly, if we leave, Italy, Greece, etc., are likely to leave, there's a greater danger that the European Union will break up in a hostile way, and that can't be refrained.
All right, Tim, care to respond to those points?
The point about how we become a more Christian country, again, as I said at the beginning of my speech, although I swing between the positions of saying it's nothing to do with Catholicism and saying it's everything to do with Catholicism, that's really up to us to shape that. And my point is that by returning control to our Parliament, we can then influence policy more than we do now. And as regards to the question about will it lead to further break-up and things like that, for some of the countries who are currently being squeezed by European policy, that breakup can't come any moment too soon. I mean, for instance, the language was used of we should be dealing with the problems of the Eurozone with solidarity. Let's be realistic. The policies of the Eurozone are decided by the European Central Bank. They are a fiscal decision. They are not anything which is motivated by religious conscience. And what tends to happen is they are decisions which are taken in favour of the German consumer in order to maintain the power of the euro internationally. So that's what's hurting Greece. It's got nothing to do with theology whatsoever.
I'm going to ask for a quick response to that from the proposers of the motion.
Thank you. It follows on from a point Gisela made and then directly from Tim's. The issue is, I would completely agree, the Eurozone needs to consolidate, it needs to have stronger institutions which may well look federal. As part of that, it includes fiscal union and the opportunity for clear social policy. But in the intervening period, there is nothing to stop European states actually demonstrating solidarity. The ECB doesn't stop that. If we were more generous to our neighbours, we could actually be doing that and not penny pinching.
Let's have another question or statement. Yes, young man, there on the aisle. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, two quick points of reply to this morning, three points to why we should support me. Firstly, there is a relationship between the European Convention of Human Rights and the Charter of Fundamental Freedoms, which comes from the European treaties. The Luxembourg has promised that it would follow wholly the jurisprudence of the Strasbourg Court. So anything that's decided in Strasbourg will also be followed in Luxembourg. And the second point was about the European Union generally. What does it say this? Ask yourself, are our religious freedoms best defended by the European Union? The answer clearly is no. All Catholics are obliged to evangelise. But the European Union was captured by the guiding principle of the Eighth that stems from France. And that's what led to the removal in 2004 of the mention of God in the treaty. The actual religious freedoms of the European Union law are a whole nation of measures designed to promote the freedoms of people. For instance, such as loggerheads, measures discriminating on the grounds of sexual orientation, and measures discriminating on the grounds of religious orientation. And guess what? Every time, measures creating discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation win. So you can never evangelise in the public sphere and mention sexuality. The second point is the social ramifications of our faith when it comes to start of life, end of life, and other forms of life like marriage and family are all threatened by the European Union. When 1.8 million Europeans signed a petition, called the One of Us petition, over the last 2 or 3 years, the European Union specifically changed a measure built within the Lisbon Treaty that promised a debate within the Parliament whenever a million signatures were guaranteed. That's because that legal provision exists solely as a liberalised with research prohibited. The Parliament and the Commission closes its. The final thing I want to say comes to Tom Tuckerhart's point about unity in the European Union. Please don't be under any misapprehension. The idea of the nation itself is a bad thing. If you search for the word nation in the Old and New Testaments, it comes up hundreds of times, and very rarely negatively. In fact, Jesus recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verse 18 and 19, calling on the disciples, calling on the apostles to make disciples of all nations, not some sort of pan-European super-state.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to
Can I just
treat-
add,
treat-
thank you
well,
for
no,
clearing up my mess. I was referring to the treaty, not the constitution. I got that wrong, but Wikipedia's
Okay.
language is not clear. So,
so, you now confess to doing your research on Wikipedia, which is... I'm going to treat that as a speech, not a question, but I will give Tom a chance to respond before he goes. Let's have another intervention from the floor. Yes, in the front here, sir.
Before you go, I'm just asking you, to address this point about subsidiarity. How is it that an organisation where decisions are taken at this high level for which people don't feel responsible?
Tom, would you like to address that? And you can deal with the last
I'll
comment
deal with
at the same
both
time.
of them.
Yeah.
Peter, of course, you're right that there's nothing sinful about the nation, and while Jesus spoke of making missions to all the nations, he was, of course, talking within a context where European unity had been achieved under Rome, so perhaps the context was a little different. You are also right, of course, about the question of freedom of expression. But you quite rightly also highlighted that the ECHR is brought into the ECJ, and very early on in the ECHR, it speaks of freedom of conscience and freedom of speech as fundamental human rights. So yes, there are challenges, of course there are challenges, with the European Parliament that frankly is organised very poorly and organised through a system that I don't think gives accountability, proper accountability to democracy. But you won't hear me asking for more of it in the European Parliament, because I do not see the European Union as a state. I see it as a cooperation of nations. I do not argue that we should make it a nation. I argue that we should not turn our back on other nations. And that is why this debate is about Catholic values. It's not about nation building, it's not about political structures, it's not about federal or non-federal systems.
What about the question
But
of
it's also,
subsidiarity?
but when you talk about nations, you talk exactly about the question of subsidiarity. Now, again, I go straight back to the words, and in fact, I shall even re-quote them for you. That authentic unity draws from the rich diversities which make it up. I'm with Pope Francis on this. I would argue very strongly that the European Union has over-centralised, and I argue very strongly that Gisela and Tim are right on that more flexibility is absolutely necessary. But I don't think that it is in our Catholic values to turn our back on others when they call for reform and they're not getting it. If we stay, if Britain stays, Britain can offer that leadership. We have done in the past. I know there's a lot of defeatism in various people's words, saying that we never achieved anything and it's always been done to us. But the truth is, the single market was our idea. Enlargement was our idea. Whenever Britain has spoken about a European interest, we've won.
I want to get a quick response from Gisela on the question of subsidiarity to that.
It's time to confess that I was one of the 15 people who wrote the European Constitution, and probably was spending 15 months with Giscard which radicalised me in this respect. And I remember when the protocol on subsidiarity and proportionality came up, my legal advisor, who was involved in Maastricht, sent me a note saying, "Here we go again, the dud vessel Maastricht is showing itself again." Because when you look at it, it never works. It never happens in practice. It does on the odd occasion, like it was on abortion, it was on women on boards, which was the other one, and the Animal Sue Directive, when the Brits under one of their presidencies wanted to have a European-wide level for what the water temperature in zoos should be. If he really believed in the principle of subsidiarity and proportionality, then he would have a mechanism in the treaties which would allow for powers to go up and down. It has no such mechanism. The only way power can flow is towards Brussels, never return. And that is the best example of that this is a hollow concept which is only brought out when it's meant to appease people who question centralisation.
Yeah, gentleman there who's been trying to get in for a while.
This debate seems to be divided between, on the one hand, idealists, on the other hand, idealists, and self-negating European debates. And I'd just like to ask the idealists, the pro-Europeans, or the Leanians, whatever you want to say, is how do you think you kind of mix, to a certain extent, the EU is broken, the EU is reform? How precisely do you expect the reform to come? Because I've never heard a proper account of how that might happen. Whether it's the utter anti-democratic nature of the EU itself, or the function of the executive and the commission is not directly accountable to us, you people, the demos of Europe. How are you supposed to reform that? Where is there in Europe the majority of people, or a meaningful community of people who wants the EU to prop reform, apart from you get to the common agricultural policy and fisheries policies, which have caused so much problems, so many problems. Or it's not just in Europe, in the world, a fundamental violation of solidarity, not to say subsidiarity. How exactly is this going to change? And if you don't have an account for that, if it is the reform as it seems to be, why on earth do we want to remain part of this construct? And one final thing, given that the very basic principle of the club is ever greater union, that's from the very beginning, the fundamental principle of Europe. Everyone who's really pro-European wants ever greater union, ever closer union rather. If we the British people do not want that, we want to second GS status, or if we want to not have that European integration, then what business do we have as a country being part of the basic principle and rules of which we fundamentally support?
I'm going to let them reflect on that for a moment or two, because I want to get in a couple more from the audience, and I think we'll go right to the back there if we could. And just while the microphone's moving, I'm going to remind you again of the motion, because most people have sort of brought it back to Catholic values, but it's just worth remembering what we're talking about. This House believes Catholic values are best served by remaining in the European Union. Yes, sir.
Michael Darcy. The panel might recall that in 2004, distinguished Italian Professor Rocco Buttiglione was nominated as Italy's European Commissioner. And when the time came for the nominees to the commission to be ratified by the Parliament, he was vetoed because he actually believed Catholic moral teaching. And therefore, Italy had to withdraw his nomination and somebody else was nominated in his place. So my question to the panel would be, how can we have confidence in an entity that it makes sense for us to fortify Catholic values by being party to an entity of which it's, to be a believing Catholic in the full sense of that word is a disqualification?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because he, of course, was one of John Paul's close advisors, somebody who you cited, Tom Tugendhat. Would either of you like to deal with those two questions together? Yeah.
I'll deal with both of them together, if I may. And the first is one of idealism. I think it is odd, forgive me, but I do think it is odd in a Catholic audience, in a Catholic space, not to have a vision of the ideal, not to have a search for the better. So I accept the critique that perhaps it's ideal, but I think that amongst Catholics, surely that is what we should be searching for. Now, you asked me where is the demos for change, or in fact that's Giesler's word. The demos for change is very clear today. You see it in France, you see it in the Netherlands, you see it in Italy. It is rising across Europe. And the danger for us is not that that demos for change isn't there, it's what it is expressing. Because it isn't asking for the change that we so often call for, the democratic change. Much of it is doing something else, it's pointing to the other. It's trying to close the border. Which is why, and I must first of all make very clear that I do not include Tim and Giesler in this comment, but why so much of the Leave campaign has left me saddened. Because the talk of immigration has not, let's be honest, been a call to open up to the world. It has been the dog whistle of unpleasantness that we've heard from many, many organisations, sadly, across the world. Nigel Farage made it particularly clear when he said that he wanted immigration down to 30 to 50,000, knowing full well that Commonwealth immigration into the United Kingdom is at 188,000, but at the same time going around and saying, well, we could swap Poles for Bangladeshis. He doesn't mean it at all. Very sadly, there is a real darkness in the immigration debate that I pay credit to both Tim and Gisela, because theirs is a very principled argument, I believe. But too much of this argument isn't. Now, on the question of European Commissioners of Catholic faith, we've had one ourselves. In fact, we've had two. One,
Your uncle.
my uncle, and one, Chris Patton. And Chris is such an active Catholic that even today he's been working with the Holy See on various elements of their own management. So it's not an exclusion to be a Catholic. And though I won't speak on that particular case because, forgive me, I don't know the detail, it is simply not true to say that practicing Catholics are excluded from the Commission. Nor, by the way, is it true to say that the Commission is undemocratic, any more than it is to say that ambassadors are unelected or generals are unelected. Of course they are. We all know that.
A bit of an open goal for you to ready those two interventions, but what do you make of the suggestion that you're the realists and the other side are the idealists?
I just want to say, first of all, that I agree entirely that the tenor of the debate around immigration has been unpleasant. The thing is, it always is. And I would remind you that the Tory party ran in 2015 on the promise of reducing immigration to the tens of thousands. So if that's a racist policy for Nigel Farage to say it, is it not a racist policy for the Conservative Party to say it? Secondly, on the point about idealism, I think the answer to that is that one is led by ideals and guided by ideals. But to attempt to build the ideal seems to me almost a heresy, because the ideal comes when Jesus comes back. It doesn't come through the European Union. We do not find our salvation through politics. We do not find our salvation through trade zones. We try and do what is practical. And one of the things that I love about the Catholic Church is its strong sense of the human and the flawed and the failings in us all. The fact that it's intensely practical. People always seem surprised whenever His Holiness talks openly and bluntly about judgment or not judging. Well, those are reflections of the fact that the Church encounters people in all their flaws all the time. And likewise, I think a practical man who is led by the ideal of brotherly love could look across a continent as diverse as ours and say, that ain't going to work if it tries to become a single ideal union. And finally, on the question of, again, injecting nativism into politics, well, it's quite possible the French would elect Marine Le Pen. The Austrians nearly elected a neo-fascist as their president. That extremism exists within Europe too. And those who do not want to be part of it, this is your chance to cauterize Britain from it and keep it out of the British body politic.
Another intervention or two from the floor. Awful to say, I'd like some women. Yes, at the back, there.
Question for Lee. I'm wondering what you think of some anti-Muslim responses. You said that being in the EU is very important for security, and by reduced danger which could happen in the event of Brexit, and Britain, Catholics, thinking at greater risk from terrorists?
Quite sure how that relates to Catholic values, but I tell you what, let's take a couple more and you can deal with them at once. Yes, gentleman there. Yeah. Right, if you're going to make a speech, why don't you come and do it at the podium and see if we can get the mic sorted out. Not your fault at all, but there's clearly a bit of a problem. Yeah, come up here and And I tell you what, while he's coming up, why don't you two respond to the question that was put to you about MI5 and MI6?
The MI5, MI6 question is very easy. I sit on the Intelligence Security Committee, which is a group of 8 people who are personally appointed by the Prime Minister to oversee MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. Intelligence sharing is done on a pure trust basis. And our strongest partners are the Five Eyes, America, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. We are a major provider of intelligence to some of our colleagues in the European Union. They would be utterly mad not to go and work with them because we give them more data than they give us. And all the cooperation which happens will go on. But, just think about this. The European Court of Justice is currently limiting some of the way we can do things. And we have a democratic accountability of our intelligence services. They're parliamentary overseeing. What the European Union is doing when it's trying to create a structure is not accountable. It has no parliamentary oversight. So what we're doing is better, democratically accountable, and after June the 24th, it will go on as it did before.
Julie, this is a little bit off the point. Can I leave it to you to pick up this on in your summation, if you want to, and just ask our Polish friend here to
Shall I start from the beginning then?
Okay, yes.
Right. My name is Rafał Libera, representing myself. The question I had was that from what Tim was saying, I got the feeling that he, almost as if the message behind it was that Britain is too Catholic or too Christian for the European Union, where in fact I would beg to differ on that point and would say that there's not much that difference between what a particular government, in this case British government or the continental government, does vis-à-vis what the church teaches. And therefore the question that needs to be asked is what is the state of the Catholic community now in Britain? And I would say, myself being Polish, that the Catholic community has been enriched by the newcomers into this country who, when it comes to Eastern Europeans like Poles, Slovaks, Hungarians, Lithuanians, are mostly Catholic. They influenced their communities, they enriched them spiritually or in other means through also integrating into those communities, and themselves being Catholic therefore influence people who they meet or work with on a daily basis and are themselves not Catholic despite being British. So now saying that actually those people who already live here for quite a few years, because if you go back to the immigration debate, the issue is not that we would stop the new people coming in, but we would actually remove some of those people that are already here. If some people are not given permanent status in Britain after withdrawal from the European Union, then, by default, if we assume, which is the case, that most of the Eastern Europeans are Catholic, the Catholic community will be impoverished. And, by default, the Catholic Church and its influence in this country will be lessened. So, I'm not British myself, but speaking, the common ground we have here is we are all Catholic. And if we want Catholic values to be further in society, then it's for the better that there are more Catholics in this country. Thank you.
I'm going to treat... We have changed it. Excellent. All right. We've got time for a couple more interventions from the floor. So, because you can come to it later on. Let's see who I want to go right to the back there. Yes, in the blue shirt. Yep.
Good evening. My name is John Dolan. It's really a question of Lee Ham. It seems to me if you want a tight immigration policy, and that's one of the effective aims of the Leave campaign, you have to go off and do it. You need to spend some money on the border force. You need to operate an immigration policy where you remove people. I think in reality, people certainly in this city, and I suspect in this country, don't want that, because we quite like our Polish funds and all the rest of it. But if that is what you want, you need to make a political decision to spend some money on it, and that's got nothing to do with Europe.
Okay, that's going as well. But I think we've got the point, and I'm going to ask the lead team to respond to that. You can sweep up the last speech as well.
Sure, thank you. Because the gentleman's point about the health of the church in Britain and immigration is a very important one for those of us who are Catholics. There's no denying that the EU has helped the Catholic Church in this country enormously. Where I go to Mass, there is an English service at 11, and there's probably about 30 of us. You then come out and you pass by at midday when the Polish Mass is taking place, and they're queuing around the street. It's absolutely extraordinary. I'm not going to deny that. You've got to understand that the Leave campaign is not arguing against immigration in principle. It's arguing for a change to the way that we manage the system. So that instead of saying you have a two-tier system of we control extra-European immigration, but any European is welcome to migrate, you'll be replaced with a point system that affects everyone. Now that might mean that some years we choose to take everyone who applies. It might mean some other years that we choose to take less people. Why would we choose to do that? Well, because we as Catholics have to think about the needs of the migrant, yes, but we also have to think about the needs of the host community. For instance, the pressures that are placed upon public services, or as has happened in some parts of this country, people finding that their jobs are undercut or their wages are depressed. So please, we're not arguing hard or fast one way or the other, which is why I made the point about the Tory manifesto in 2015. Whatever's motivating Nigel Farage, who knows? But I'm sure David Cameron is not a racist. The reason why he made that pledge is because he knows the British people care about it, because he knows there are pressures on jobs and wages and services. So we're not arguing for no migration. What we're arguing for is a different system, which again, it always comes back to this word, we control.
Right, Tom, I know you've got to go shortly. Do you want to just come in on that before you do?
If you wish, I'll come in very briefly. It is of course very difficult to talk about migration in the Catholic Communion without recognising the fact that it's almost impossible to go to an English Catholic church and find only English people there. Because we're all migrants in the Catholic Church. We're all Irish or Italian or French or Polish or Filipino or Sri Lankan. The migrancy that has come into our communion has enriched us and has made us significantly better, and very, very much so, in our church. Now, I do understand what Tim says about taking control, but all I say is, too often it's an illusion. It is a statement by politicians who say they can control the world if only you'll give me the power. And it's almost the illusion that the devil gave to Christ: if you will stand on the top of the mountain, you can command the world. It simply isn't true. The reality is that politicians do not command gold prices or oil prices, do not affect migration numbers from wars in foreign countries, famines or recessions in other parts. We don't. What we can do is we can work together to try and make those things in the areas nearest to us better. We can't command the world, but we can work together. And I'm reminded of the words of Burke when he was told that he shouldn't be getting himself involved in the French Revolution. That people speak as though England were not a part of Europe. We are. And yes, of course, Europe is part of the world. But it is right, as Churchill put it, that we should work through the areas that we can to be the link between the parts that matter, the link between the Commonwealth, the United States, and Europe. There is no one else. We have a unique position. We are blessed from that position, and it does have implications. But it also means that we have remarkable influence and remarkable ability to direct change. There is an illusion of taking back control by standing alone, when the reality is that the waves, the tides of humanity, the seasons in mankind, mean that control can only be exercised together, as a communion, as a people. And that is why the Catholic Church teaches so strongly union, not division.
Thank you very much, Neil. We'll let you go now, but thank you for your time. I'll just take a couple more interventions, and then I'm going to ask first Tim and then Julie to sum up for their respective sides. So, who's got their hand? Lady in the front here, yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Eugene Turner. I'm an undecided voter. Also, I'm a New Zealander. And my first experience of the EU was when our nation was put into crisis because Britain left and we had no market. And we had very little warning. And really, New Zealand was pretty well settled to be the breadbasket of Britain. So that's my first experience. Okay, so I've been here 15 years. I don't have the whole history of the EU at my fingertips, so I'm looking at what's happening now. In my church, there are a lot of young people who have come here because of the crises in their own countries. In Spain, formerly, or previously also Ireland and Italy, they are here because they cannot get work. And in fact, when I listened to Spain, every young man who met had no job and couldn't get one. So I'm asking, what is the EU really doing in terms of all its members? The other thing is, when I tell people that my niece in New Zealand struggles to come here to get a permit, they do not believe me. They say that you are part of the Commonwealth. And it seems to me that being part of the EU, Britain has abandoned, in practical terms, its Commonwealth reality. There is a lot made about it, but in practical terms, it is very poor. Also, I have a new daughter-in-law. She is South African. She is an A&E doctor of 12 years' experience, and they will not give her a contract and pay her less. They were prepared to pay her less than her husband, who works in the tourist industry, and that is not a high-paying field. So I want to know where Catholic values can actually be practically put into service, because I do not see that they are now. When I asked someone recently how he thought that Christian values were going to be entered into more, he said he didn't know. And what his concern was that the reasons Britain went into the EU in the first place were now not current at all. I'll give you one example. I went and listened to some of the debate over the same-sex marriage bill, and I was one of the 600 plus people who signed that bill, signed the petition against it. When I got a copy of the bill, and when I told my friends that the bill actually said where two men, one will be called husband and one will be called wife, where there are two women, one will be called husband and one will be called wife, people did not believe me. I mean, this is the year of Shakespeare's anniversary, and I think it would turn in his grave. So this friend of mine said that he did not feel that the EU or Britain were better than each other in terms of Catholic Christian values. So please, my question is, what do I do? How do I best represent Catholic principles in my vote? Because I am seriously wondering where they are.
Very good question. Let's take... I'm going to go to the final one right at the back there. Yeah.
Thank you very much for using I'm a doctor in background engineer. The first point I'd like to ask the genuine question to everyone here. That you mentioned, Renee's mentioned, I quite agree with obviously, when discussing this, she shouldn't just think about from our own perspective, to think about what sets you Europe. But I would also say, in the context of that, you sit here as, I'm guessing, that don't stay out for many people. Looking at it from a privileged perspective, how do we know that everything else is affected? But I would like to ask, frankly, when I come into contact with you, which is very blind area of London, a lot of people now are very concerned about things in the EU. They're concerned about the fact that many health workers there that don't have an industry anymore. The fact that opportunities of working class people feel they don't belong anymore because of the rapid change of population movement. My question, I suppose, for both sides is, to is so relevant. And I'd also like to add specifically, and it's very serious, and I think quite agree with what Frank from our perspective, if we look at the EU, it being part of the previous isolations in the rest of the world, it means it's nothing to do with being in the. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed.